My attention for the last 3 years has been repeatedly drawn to the subject of mesmerism, and about 9 months ago, it occurred to me, quite suddenly, that in the series of experiments made hitherto, there had been a very remarkable and most unaccountable omission. No person has yet been mesmerized in articulo mortis. It remained to be seen, in such condition, there existed in the patient any susceptibility to the magnetic influence. There were other points to be ascertained, but these most excited my curiosity. In looking around me for some subject by whose means I might test these particulars, I was brought to think of my friend, M. Ernest Valdemar, his limbs much resembling those of John Randolph, and also for the whiteness of his whiskers, in violent contrast to the blackness of his hair, the latter, in consequence, being very generally mistaken for a wig. His temperament was markedly nervous, and rendered him a good subject for mesmeric experiment. On 2 or 3 occasions I had him put to sleep with little difficulty, but was disappointed in other results which his peculiar constitution had naturally led me to anticipate. I always attributed my failure at these points to the disordered state of his health. For some months previously to my becoming acquainted with him, his physicians had declared him a confirmed diasis. It was his custom, indeed, to speak calmly for his approaching disillusion, as a matter of neither to be avoided nor regretted. When the ideas to which I have alluded first occurred to me, it was of course very natural that I should think of M. Valdemar. I knew the steady philosophy of the man too well to apprehend any scruples from him, and he had no relatives in America who would be likely to interfere. I spoke to him frankly upon the subject, and to my surprise, his interest seemed vividly excited. I say to my surprise, for although he had always yielded his person freely to my experiments, he had never before given me any tokens of sympathy with what I did. It was finally arranged between us that he would send for me about 24 hours before the period announced by his physicians that of his decease. My dear, you may as well come now. D and F are agreed that I cannot hold out beyond tomorrow midnight. I think they have hit the time nearly. Valdemar. I received this note within half an hour after it was written, and in 15 minutes more, I was in the dying man's chamber. I had not seen him for 10 days, and was appalled by the fearful alteration in which the brief interval had wrought in him. His face wore a leaden hue, the eyes were utterly lusterless, and the emasculation was so extreme that the skin had been broken through by the cheekbones. His expectoration was excessive, the pulse barely perceptible. The doctors were in the audience. After pressing Valdemar's hand, I took these gentlemen aside, and obtained from them a minute account of the patient's condition. The left lung had been for 18 months in a semi-osseous or catatonic state, and was of course entirely useless for all purposes of vitality. The right, in its upper portion, was also partially, if not thoroughly, ossified, while the lower region was merely a mass of purulent tubercles running one into another. It was the opinion of both physicians that M. Valdemar would die about midnight of the morrow, Sunday. It was then 7 o'clock on Saturday evening. When they had gone, I spoke freely with M. Valdemar on the subject of his approaching disillusion, as well as, more particularly of the experiment proposed. He still professed himself quite willing and even anxious to have it made, and urged me to commence it at once. It had been my design, originally, to wait for his physicians, but I was induced to proceed, first, by the urgent entreaties of young Valdemar, and secondly, by my conviction that I had not a moment to lose, as he was evidently sinking fast. Mr. L was so kind as to accede to my desire that he would take notes of all that occurred, and it was from his Miranda that what I now have to relate is, for the most part, either conceded or copied verbatim. It waited about 5 minutes of 8 when, taking the patient's hand, I begged him to state, as distinctly as he could, to Mr. L, whether he, and Valdemar, was entirely willing that I should make the experiment of mesmerizing him in his then condition. He replies feebly, but quite audibly, "Yes, I wish to be mesmerized," adding immediately afterwards, "I fear you have deferred it too long." While he spoke thus, I commenced the passes which I had already found most effectual in subduing him. He was evidently influenced with the first lateral stroke of my hand across his forehead, but although I exerted all my powers, no farther perceptible effect was induced until some minutes after 10 o'clock, when Doctors D and F called, according to appointments. By this time, his pulse was imperceptible and his breathing was stertorous at all intervals of half a minute. At 5 minutes before 11, I perceived unequivocal signs of the mesmeric influence. As I approached Valdemar, I made a kind of half effort to influence his right arm into pursuit of my own, and as I passed the latter gently to and fro above his person. "Valdemar?" I asked. "Are you asleep?" He made no answer. I perceived a tremor about the lips, thus induced to repeat the question again and again. "Yes, asleep now. Do not wake me. Let me die so." "Do you still feel pain in the breast, Valdemar?" The answer now was immediate, but even less audible than before. "No pain. I am dying." While I spoke, there was a marked change over the countenance of the sleepwaker. The eyes rolled themselves slowly open. The pupils disappeared upwardly. The skin generally assumed a cadaverous hue, resembled not so much parchment as white paper. The upper lip, at the same time, rifted itself away from the teeth, which it had previously covered completely, while the lower jaw fell with an audible jerk, leaving the mouth widely extended, and disclosing in full view of the swollen and blackened tongue. I now feel that I have reached a point of this narrative at which every reader will be startled into positive disbelief. It is my business, however, simply to proceed. I have spoken both of sound and of voice. I mean to say that the sound was one of either wonderfully thrilling distinct syllabification. Then Valdemar spoke, obviously in reply to the question I had propounded to him a few minutes before. I asked him, it will be remembered, if he had still slept. He now said, "Yes. No. I have been sleeping. And now, I am dead. No person present even affected to deny or attempted to repress the unutterable, shuddered horror which these few words thus uttered were so well calculated to convey. From this period until the close of last week, an interval of nearly 7 months, we continued to make daily calls at M. Valdemar's house, accompanied now and then by medical and other friends. It was on Friday last that we finally resolved to make the experiment of awakening, or attempting to awaken him. For the purpose of relieving M. Valdemar from his mesmeric trance, I made use of the customary passes. These, for a time, were unsuccessful. The first indication of revival was afforded by a partial descent of the iris. M. Valdemar, can you explain to us what are your feelings or wishes now? There was an instant return of the headache circles on the cheeks. The tongue quivered, or rather, rolled violently in the mouth. For God's sakes, quick, put me to sleep. Or quick, awaken me. Quick, I say to you that I am dead. I was thoroughly unnerved, and for an instant remained undecided what to do. At first, I made an endeavor to compose the patient, but failing in this through total abeyance of the will, I retraced my steps and I earnestly struggled to awaken him. For what really occurred, however, it is quite impossible that any human being could have been prepared. As I rapidly made the mesmeric passes, amid ejaculations of dead, absolutely bursting from the tongue and not from the lips of the sufferer, his whole frame at once, within the space of a single minute, or even less, shrunk, crumbled, absolutely rotted away beneath my hands. Upon the bed, before that whole company, there lay a nearly liquid mass of loathsome, of detestable putridity.